Hi friends, I hope all is well. We're wrapping up this daily collage practice series for November in this video. Let's get into this collage for day 26. I didn't have much time on this day, so I pulled a few very similar transparent papers and a limited amount of pattern papers. These papers have a muted color palette that will complement the blue and green transparent papers. As I did with collages for days 23, 24, and 25 in my previous video, I'm cutting the transparent papers into pieces instead of using one large layer covering the whole collage like I did for day 22. These pieces will be elements that are incorporated into the design. Also, these elements will be kept on the page but not glued down right away, so I can audition the papers that will be underneath. I'm checking for color contrast and to see if enough of the pattern is visible. I like to trim off the paper overlapping the edges when I need to get a better look at the work in progress collage. For this collage, it helped me to see if I needed to add more elements on this layer or if it's time to glue the transparent papers on top. I decided to glue them, then take another look once that was done. This collage needed another yellow element. It was needed to balance the design and add another light value element. Also, I didn't want it to be square like the other two yellow elements. It's more interesting to have one in a different shape. The long, narrow shape fits perfectly into this area. I'm really inspired by the layering of patterns and transparent papers. I like this color palette as well. Also, I like the placement of the different values seen in the grayscale version. Let's go on to day 27. This day was Thanksgiving, so my time was extra limited on this day. I pulled this piece of expressively painted transparent paper and a few painted papers in a limited color palette. Most of the painted papers are solid or textural, only a couple with patterns, because I wanted there to be contrast between the very busy transparent paper and the non-transparent papers. This design will be simple and easy to make. I'm starting by cutting the transparent paper because it'll be the first layer and cover the whole page. The non-transparent papers will form the next layer, which will be a loose cruciform composition. When gluing a large piece of transparent paper, I like to do it in sections, starting at one end of the page and working my way towards the other end. This will help to make sure the paper will be glued to the whole page with minimal wrinkles. I was rushing on this day, so I was a bit careless and tore a section of the paper. This will be covered by some of the other papers in a bit. I chose the color palette of blue, green, red, and pink because it will provide a good color contrast to the yellow oxide and bright green on the transparent paper. This isn't a typical color palette that I would choose, but since I'm working in a sketchbook, it's a good time to try different color combinations. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted contrast between the very busy transparent paper and the non-transparent papers. Using contrasting colors will do that. I'm starting with dark value papers to contrast with the mid to light value ground layer. Both of these red papers were made with absorbent ground. I've used these type of papers in a few other collages in this series. I have a tutorial video that I'll link in the description box. A short explanation is to apply the absorbent ground over the whole paper, let it dry, then apply acrylic paint on top. Both of these papers have a layer of red paint, then a layer of burgundy paint. I sprayed water on top while the burgundy paint was still wet. It created a beautiful textural pattern. As you can imagine with all these layers, it makes the paper thicker, so more adhesive is needed to secure it to the page. I realized at this point that my painted paper selection was too limited, so I brought out a few more papers that were mid to light value. Even though the ground layer is mid to light value and there is a light value pink paper, I wanted to include more papers with these values to elevate the design. I won't be using all of them, I just wanted options. I talked about this in other videos that I like to include solid color papers if a design is looking busy or if it needs an area where the viewer's eyes can rest. This pink paper will be that element. It doesn't necessarily need to be mid to large in size. It can be an accent or a smaller, narrow element like this one. I chose this paper because it had a pattern. The collage layer looked a bit plain to me, so adding a pattern, even a subtle one, was needed. I'm going to add a few accent elements, then this collage will be finished. I was tempted to add another solid pink element in the upper middle area for color balance, but I stopped myself. I wanted to see if it really was necessary because I tend to like odd number of elements to balance the design. I'm not sure, so I'm leaving it as is. Overall, I'm happy with the way it turned out. Not bad for a collage that was made in 15 minutes in real time. Here's the grayscale version. It has very strong value contrast. Let's continue to day 28. I brought out again expressively painted transparent paper and non-transparent papers in a limited color palette. It's a good challenge to work within these restrictions. Same gluing options as day 26, glue stick for the pattern paper and fluid matte medium for the transparent papers. I decided on the transparent paper with only bright green and turquoise because the other paper had a dark value. It'd be harder to work with any dark value pattern papers that are larger than accent elements. It seemed too limiting to me. I'll use that paper at another time. Instead of covering the whole page with this paper, I'm cutting it into sections. Each paper will be a different size and shape. First one has a good balance of painted and non-painted areas. The second one is heavily painted. The third is lightly painted. I chose these 3 different sections to give myself more paper options when adding non-transparent papers. A dark value paper will have a different contrast when placed next to the heavily painted paper as opposed to the lightly painted paper. I'm starting with the black with white circles paper because the paper has strong contrast. By placing it in this area, it will add dark value contrast against the papers above and below it. I held off on gluing it until I chose some of the other papers that'll be next to it. This white and black stripe paper that reads as mostly light value will add contrast against the transparent paper above it and the black with white circles paper next to it. Next, I'm looking for another dark value paper to place below the white and black stripes paper. I'm being a lot more mindful of value contrast with this collage because of the limited color palette. Also being mindful of cutting the papers in different sizes and shapes. As you watch me finish this collage, I'll add music and come back to review it. I love the color combination of bright colors with black, gray, and white. Also, the black, gray, and white elements form a diagonal composition. This is the last page in this Strathmore sketchbook. I'm happy that I was able to complete it during this daily practice series. The value contrast is easy to see in the color version, but here's the grayscale version. Let's go on to day 29. Now that the Strathmore sketchbook is completed, the final two collages will be created in this 8.5 by 11-inch sketchbook. I brought out transparent papers in coordinating colors. The first two are painted tissue papers, and the others are monoprinted deli papers. I won't be using all these papers. I just wanted enough pulled so I had options. Along with transparent papers, I brought out these very colorful non-transparent papers that are painted and monoprinted that lean towards dark value. I chose this monoprinted paper over the almost duplicate one because I like the brush stroke texture where the two paint colors meet. This paper will be glued last, but I'm keeping it out so I can audition the other papers that'll be underneath it. I cut out the long section of this video where I tried different placement of these two papers. I left this section in because it was the one I decided on. The reason I like this orientation is that more of the striped paper will be visible under the transparent paper. Also, it will be more visually pleasing in the upper left area with the other paper along the right edge. The first non-transparent paper is this dark blue absorbent ground paper. I chose it because it will add contrast against the two transparent papers. This is another absorbent ground paper, but this one leans towards mid to dark value, so that's why I'm using it in this area. I'm gluing this striped transparent paper now because I won't be placing any other papers underneath it. I love the area where it overlaps on top of the dark blue paper. This is why I started using transparent papers more often in my collage practice. It was time to introduce a red or burgundy element to the collage. The transparent paper was too lightweight for this area. The burgundy monoprinted paper added more weight. Adding it to this area will help to balance the design since the transparent paper to the right has burgundy on it. I'm continuing to balance the design by adding another dark value element using the same dark blue paper that's in the upper right for the lower left area. As you watch me add a few more elements, I'll put on some music and come back for the review. I didn't notice that the camera stopped filming right before I glued the last transparent paper into place. I applied it in the same way as the other one, gluing it in sections. This is a very busy design that has strong mid to dark values with only a small amount of light values. You can get a better look at the light values in this grayscale version. Let's go on to the last collage for this video and for this series. I'm still working in the 8.5 by 11-inch sketchbook. I pulled more painted tissue papers and monoprinted deli papers, but this time in brighter colors. The non-transparent papers are similar colors with the addition of dark blue papers. The pink and purple bridge shape element that's on the top of the pile of papers is the inspiration for the geometric design that this collage will have. I'm starting by auditioning different transparent paper options, so most will be left unglued until the design starts to take shape. I wanted to use as many transparent papers as possible this time. I'm trying different placements to see how these papers will look overlapping each other. Also, as usual, I want to make sure the placement of these papers is balanced. Finally, I made the decision to glue these papers into place. I should mention that when I glue a piece of paper, I have no problem with partially or fully covering it if it's needed to make the design better. Once again, my camera stopped filming. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why that happened. Let me talk a bit about the two elements that were glued in place. I call these shapes bridges. Along with dome shapes, these are ones that I like to use when I'm creating a geometric design. I added the dark blue bridge shape because the design needed a dark value element and there was room on the page for a large one. As I mentioned earlier, the pink and purple bridge shape was the inspiration for the design. Again, it's a large size element. Back to what I'm doing now, the collage needed a light solid color element. As I mentioned during day 27, solid elements are used to add calmness to a busy design and give the viewer's eyes a place to rest. This light blue element is being used for those reasons. I cut out two different curve shapes so more of the transparent papers underneath it will be visible. The layering of these transparent papers underneath is beautiful. I wanted to make sure it'd be seen. This eggplant color paper is another one that was made with absorbent ground. I love the texture and variation of color that occurs when using this medium. The design needed more dark values, but this time I'm scaling down the size and shape of the elements. Since this collage has bridge shapes, I wanted to make sure to include some dome shapes as well. The deep color of these shapes adds a nice contrast with the pink papers underneath. I was fortunate that some of the scraps I pulled were already cut to the correct size, like this dark blue dome shape. More solid light blue paper elements were needed to add more light values and to balance the design. A few more light and dark value accent elements will be added, then this collage will be finished. This collage took the longest out of all 30 in this series to make, around 30 minutes in real time. It has many different layers and elements. It's very busy, but there are areas where the viewer's eyes can rest. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm comfortable covering up a piece of paper if it's needed to elevate the design. The solid pink tissue paper element is completely covered by the two large bridge shape elements in the lower half of the collage. Here's the grayscale version so you can easily see all three values. There are a few things that I'm taking away from this daily collage series. There are many collages that I want to reproduce the design and color combinations. Also, I want to include transparent papers more often in my art practice. These papers add depth and complexity to a design. I hope you enjoyed this series of daily collage videos. As I mentioned in the first video, I understand that not everyone can create art every day, but I encourage you to have a sketchbook practice. It's a great way to try different designs, color combinations, or just play. One more thing, I created a playlist for just this series that I'll link in the description box. If you missed one or more of the videos, it'll be easier for you to find in a separate playlist. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. Take care.